join and stuff.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're live. So this is me, June, and we have John C. We also were trying to get Vile, and he's just having some technical issues right now. But yeah, welcome to this study group for governance, EOS governance. I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to come on the screen with us, we are able to get up to 4 people. So does anyone in the audience, number one, if anyone in the audience can hear us and see us, just let us know on the chat on the side. Stefan, okay, great. And I know you mentioned hey, Stefan, that's great. And I know you mentioned you're just wanting to listen to audio and probably participate in the chat today, which is fine. That's great. And then, so who else is here? John C., you're already live. Stefan, Jem, if you're here, okay, great. So we have a couple people, Jem and Stefan, on the chat. And so while we wait for Vile, this is kind of, we wanted to make this more of an unconference style, and just wanted to keep the agenda open. So was hoping, there would be a lot of people that are interested in particular areas in governance so that we could just discuss them in this session here. And so John and I were just talking briefly beforehand in the green room about what maybe a few things that we might want to discuss. So, but we'll keep it. We'll just open it up to everybody. I mean, what is your interest, I guess, in this particular session or just this governance study group? Is there any particular issue that you want to discuss? How you see kind of the study group, I guess, going forward. So Stefan or Jem, any particular interests or concerns with you guys? Oh, and then wait, John, that's you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So John just put a message there. So, and we're still waiting for Vile. He was one of the early guys I reached out to. So I guess, yeah, so there's nothing from there. John, maybe I'll go with you. Okay. Jem's just paying attention. So John, is there anything you'd like to discuss or how you see this going forward, this study group?
This governance study group, I think one of the topical governance issues right now is the Constitution, right? Or the interim Constitution, and how we work towards having a referendum on a more solid constitution. And what's on the table at the moment is version 2, as proposed by Block 1, and some of the controversial issues in there in terms of arbitration, base layer, and application layer arbitration.
Yeah, that's a hot topic, I think, for sure. So in the Constitution, version 2 and version 1, the current one, and I spoke to John earlier, just right before we got on, that hey, I think the first half of this could be more informal, just discussing particular topics like how we're doing it, and then we could go straight into the Constitution and just go over it, like both versions, our current interim Constitution and the proposed one, and just together just go through each article one by one. And I thought that'd be a good exercise. And I think that's a practical way to do it, since we're just digging our hands into the Constitution and just starting from there. The philosophical discussions and all that, I think that's great, and that's just a very important part of it. But yeah, that could go in many different directions. So it's not as efficient as just saying, okay, what do we have? What's on the table, and maybe possibly, with the philosophical discussions, have a third alternative that maybe it could be slightly different from either of the two, but you know, it seems as though people are likely to go with something you know, that's currently on the table right now. So so if anybody else, whenever you know, we're getting a few people here, so if people want to get on the screen, just let us know and we could bring you on the screen to be part of this video chat. Otherwise, you can just chat by text on the right-hand screen. One cool feature, just as an FYI, we have a polling. So we could take advantage of this polling feature that we have. It's at the bottom of the screen. And one thing we can maybe this could be, you know, just John, since you mentioned the two versions, maybe we could do a poll on that. Okay, so Vile has I'm going to invite him in. So do you want to do? I mean, we could test this feature out. What's a good question? Hey, Vile.
Hello. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry, my battery ran out and I couldn't unmute for some reason from my phone. It was really painful experience. I will try the app next time. This time I had only the browser version on my mobile, so that might be one reason. But yeah, sorry. Let's.
Okay.
Go.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're live here. So no, this is us three, which is great. This could be the beginnings of a working group, a constitutional working group. But at this point, we're very early. So Space Invaders. Yeah, you know, hey, we should do some icebreakers with, or is maybe there's a kind of another reference to Space Invaders that I'm not catching here, but yeah, it's.
Yeah, I think Jem is referring. By the way, hi Jem. Jem is probably referring to the symbol or the logo or the icon.
I gotcha. Yeah, it does look like it. So thanks for joining us, Vile. Yeah, Vile and I were in kind of Telegram chats back and forth about potentially working on the Constitution eventually. But I think starting out as a study group is a good way to go. Just get more people involved. Just, you know. But if you want to we could do a poll just for people to see if there's kind of active participation in this. We'll say, you know, what's a good question? What do you lean towards, version 1 or version 2 of the Constitution? Something like that. How's that? Like, what is? I could create a poll right now, just for fun.
The third one in there, which is current Constitution, version 2, or other.
Okay. What is your current preference regarding the Constitution? Let me mute myself.
Yeah, I was also going to ask: is there option C, other? And
I don't think there is right now, but I guess that's what kind of people will probably be working on.
Yeah, we can make one.
Coming up with their own versions.
Poll.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you guys in the chat right now can vote on what your preference is in regards to the Constitution. We have version 1, which is our interim one, version 2, bytemasters, and other is the other option. So it seems as though, you know, at least in our group here, I didn't vote, but maybe I should. But version 2 is very popular. The most recent one that Bytemaster proposed out of this group, and then a couple people are either undecided or have another version in mind. So this is interesting. So for those, when we say other, is it, maybe my next question would be, is it, what parts of, what is the other? I'm just trying to get a better idea of what the people who voted for other had in mind, just to see if it's maybe even closer to version 1 or version 2 or what, or if it's just a mix of both, or people are just undecided. I'm undecided actually right now. I'm more undecided than I think most people about it.
Other are complete.
Okay.
Well, to me, the other would mean that we would have a constitution which would define terms well. That's something that version 1 doesn't do. I opened, upon main launch, I opened an issue on GitHub on this, that the constitution doesn't define terms basically in any way. They talk about member without defining who can be a member. Can some juridical person be a member? Is member just an account? Is just for natural persons? If that's just for natural persons, what about block producers in that case? And the other would also mean a constitution which wouldn't steal the tokens after 2 years. And for example, on GitHub issues, one solution was proposed that those could be rented when there is a rental contract. Those could be rented by the system, and the tokens would be still owned by the account owner. And then there is, of course, this arbitration issue. And then I would also like to have a constitution which would define the norm hierarchy, where it stands. Because with the version 1 constitution, some people think the pyramid, the upside down, for example, some people interpret the constitution at the lower end of the pyramid, and some at the higher end of pyramid. And we would need to define the norm hierarchy. Basically, constitution in state governments, constitution is at the highest point of the hierarchy. But it's not really defined. It's just some random contract that we agree upon. But yeah, this is what
that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of topics that you kind of touched upon, and I think part of it was very similar in terms of ambiguity. I think one of your first points, I think Tom mentioned too much ambiguity, so need to clean that up. So I think what you were mentioning about having formal definitions of who a member is part of that. And then Jem also, fixed problems with version 1. So I think, yeah, maybe the other is, could mean just an improvement and upgrade to version 1 is probably falls in that category. But you mentioned a lot, Ville. So there's a lot of topics to discuss there. I think you mentioned 2 or 3. I'm trying to remember. I remember the first and the last, and the last one, which maybe I can quickly ask you about your pyramid kind of analogy, where you're saying the form of. So maybe can you explain that a little bit? I was a little bit confused about what you meant about that. So.
Yeah, in Finnish we call that norm hierarchy. I have to check if that's
norm,
an English
NORM?
term.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. There is hierarchy of the norms, apparently, in English, but basically, I will check some source here. Something like this. Now I found some link on practical law. But yeah, it's not much because it's just from practical law and they don't really give you anything without subscription. So, well, basically the norm hierarchy or hierarchy of norms in Finnish, we use that to describe which law triumphs the other. So in Finland, we have the constitution, then we have the normal laws, then we have the agencies and governmental branches that can divide, those can define guidelines. And then we have kind of a case law. In Finland, we have civil law, but there are still cases. So yeah, this is basically the norm hierarchy. For example, if some agency, let's say the tax office, defines a guideline on cryptocurrencies, but they have to obey the law. So whatever the law says will triumph over their guidelines. So this is basically the hierarchy, and traditionally, constitution is at the highest point of the hierarchy. Of course, nowadays we have EU, and it's a bit more complicated than that. But here in EOS, we could define two layers: constitution and the normal Ricardian contracts. So we can have this pyramid in two ways. We could have the constitution at the highest point of the hierarchy, which would triumph over the Ricardian contract, or then we could have it upside down, defining just the concepts which are not defined by the Ricardian contract. So basically, and by Ricardian contract, I don't mean the constitution Ricardian contract, I mean the accounts Ricardian contract. So basically, if I have a DApp and you guys are users of that DApp, and let's say that my DApp, at the point of my DApp, lie to others as a game. Let's say that it's a game that you have to lie. Then the constitution would say that you shall not lie. In this case, which triumphs the other?
Okay. I'm hearing a little bit of my echo.
I will mute.
Headphones, Vila? Oh, okay. So yeah, that's a good example. And Thomas, if you want to join us, we have room for one person here. But Thomas, do you want? I'll invite you if you do have a webcam right now. And if not, please, Thomas, feel free to answer Vile. I'll invite you in right now.
Who would police that, Vile?
Hey there. Greetings.
Hey. How's it going, Thomas?
Doing real good. Vile's question's a common one.
Okay.
We often run into. And we've tried to articulate it, but obviously we haven't done a good enough job, that anytime you have a DApp, as long as your work stays inside or your interactions stay inside that DApp, the rules of the DApp supersede the Constitution. So yeah, you can't lie, but you signed up for this DApp, which has rules that say, notwithstanding the whole lying thing, as long as you're inside this DApp, you're actually kind of supposed to lie. And therefore, I agree not to sue anybody else who's playing this DApp with me. As long as we're all in the DApp, I give you permission to lie to me, and I will hold you harmless against any lies you tell me. And you give me permission to lie to you, as long as we're inside the DApp. Now, it doesn't mean I go across to the eBay equivalent and I lie to you about what I'm selling you, and then I can pretend that somehow, well, we agreed to lie to each other over here in VA's DApp, so I get to lie to you anywhere. No. But inside the context of VA's app, you're supposed to. And so that's just another contract where you say, in this context, we agree to waive our right to be told the truth, and I promise not to take action against you. And if I don't sign that, I'm not allowed to play the game.
Yeah, that's a simple case. What if my account doesn't want the tokens to be stolen after 3 years? Which contract triumphs on the in that case?
Yeah, that was. I'm not going to defend that one. I was a little surprised when Dan unveiled that. His defense was, it says may, not must. The community's allowed to take them, but doesn't. Seriously? Yeah. And that it's supposed to only apply in theory to accounts that have zero activity, like you never even logged in. Maybe you're dead in a ditch somewhere. And I'm like, maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should be like 7 years, or 20 or something. Because I mean, really, all outside of blockchain, if you vanish from the face of the earth for several years, at some point they do declare you dead, and then your heirs are going to go take your stuff. So that's not unheard of.
But this was more like a tool for thought experiment with rules that kind of static rules that Constitution would define. And then I would define other ways in my contract. The solutions that I proposed in the GitHub issue on this token confiscation thing, that we could obey the Ricardian contract of the account over the Constitution. But what do you think, Thomas? Is it in this case where we define static rules like this confiscation thing? Can I still bypass that? Will my Ricardian contract of my account triumph on top of over the Constitution?
That's a hard question. I'd need to come through some different use cases to try to puzzle that out. But
just for clarification too, so the confiscation, I think, article was still in this interim constitution. I have to.
Oh yeah, and okay. Somebody pointed out that we don't actually have to worry about it for another 2.5 years or something, or 2 3/4 years. There's time to get around to fixing that if we want to. But I think just from a conceptual perspective, the idea that, oh yeah, you own it, but if you go silent for a couple of years, it just, the community takes it away from you. That sat really badly with a lot of people who would kind of like to be able to treat their EOS tokens as property and not have their property just snatched away because they were busy doing other things. I think one of the suggestions for that might be to say, we as a community could say, if you register over here that you're likely to be idle for a while, we'll let that go. Or I'm going to designate Fred over here to be my custodian, and he'll come log in periodically and take, just like you would appoint a lawyer, or you'd have somebody watch your houseboat if you're away from your boat for a few months. I mean, at some point you do have responsibilities to your property. But if somebody were to propose a constitutional amendment to say drop that provision entirely or change it from 3 years to 7, I think that might make sense. The argument in favor of the 3 years, when I hadn't validated this, but I'd heard that the statute of limitations on arbitration clauses is 3 years. So if you sign the Constitution, you go away for 3 years and you come back, are you still covered by arbitration? Which would be relevant.
That's
of course, when you come back to the community, as soon as you log in and start to do things, you're using the system contract, which means you are re-signing the Constitution every time you transact. So I think in that case, I don't think it's that big of an issue. But at some point, we as a community have to say, here's how we want to be around our fellow members of the community who are idle. And I don't have the answer to that. I think that might be a good referendum question.
I would propose the renting approach,
right.
Because then you would still own the tokens, but the system will rent them for you, and then of course then the interest that you get could go to the common pool, but you would still own the tokens. So
or you use a portion of your income to pay for some, caretaker who comes around and make sure all the doors are locked or whatever the equivalent is on your account.
Because personally, I had Bitcoins for years without touching them. So it's. I think that 3 years is nothing comparing. Like if you have just, you can still have normal investments where you don't really interact or intervene in 5 years or 10 years.
I suspect they check and see if your mail is being returned unopened or stamped deceased on it or something like that. I imagine they take some action.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So that's an interesting issue, and Yves mentioned that it was one of the most contentious topics.
It was contentious because it came out of the blue. I think if it had been in the first white paper and people had 12 months to think about it, that might have had a different emotional impact. But it was like out of nowhere, sort of little slipped in. I'm like, hello. So I was actually glad I wasn't called on to defend it because I didn't really understand it.
Yeah, and then John did mention it's removed in version 2. So that's another
a sign that Dan noticed that people were outraged and upset.
Yeah. So okay, go ahead, Vic.
But yeah, that was the norm hierarchy issue. It's not. Well, of course, it haven't been tried in arbitration yet, so we don't really know. But in some situations, it's clear that your Ricardian contract of the account would triumph, like Thomas said, over the Constitution. But in this kind of static rules, which contract will triumph over the other? So this is the norm hierarchy problem that we don't have in normal society. In normal society, that's very simple. That our hierarchy is very straightforward. But in this case, it's not yet. It's new. Of course, there are no decisions, arbitration, nor court. So
to follow up on that, since Thomas, you answered Vile's question about the DApp layer recording contract having kind of precedence over the Constitution,
but within its boundaries, right? It defines a new space, and it says, okay, in my lying game, it's poker, right? Like you're supposed to deceive the other poker players. It's like, hello, or anything. You can imagine all sorts of different games that would involve, deceiving other players. That's pretty normal. That in the context of that game, it would be allowed or even encouraged. But just because you played the game doesn't mean you were waiving your right to be lied and not be lied to when you buy a car or, buy a home or something. So it's very context dependent, and that's why the Ricardian contracts are so powerful, is they exist in the context of a smart contract or set of smart contracts, or in a DApp or a set of DApps. And so it's like you go to a club and they require you to wear a tie. That doesn't mean you have to wear a tie everywhere you go, but in the club you do.
So is that the distinction between contract law and external law, whether it's, common civil or criminal law, that if you have this contract, this Ricardian contract, it supersedes kind of things that are external to it? Is that because I'm trying to figure out that, you mentioned that would be the case, but where in the law does that precedence, is that?
Well, remember, the entire blockchain is property. Like, people don't live in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no standing armies or jails in a blockchain. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't harvest vegetables in the blockchain. It's all just property, right? There's no life and liberty in there. So it can only be contract law, really. That's the whole idea, is that it's this space we've entered into where we've got our property and we're making rules about how we're going to interact with each other around the property that's in here, the data, the transactions, the whatever. And so I'm not saying you can't do things in a contract. You have a contract and then you can behave in ways that get you arrested. Yeah, of course you can. Like, I could sign a lease to buy a car and then steal the car and not make any payments, and then they might report me for theft. Yes, of course. But that being arrested doesn't happen inside the context of the contract. It happens in the context of society. And how it's handled in the United States might be very different than how it's handled in Canada, Mexico, or Southeast Asia, or wherever. But the cool thing about the EOS blockchain is it is its own little contractual space where all the rules apply to all of us the same, so I can have transactions with other people without having to worry about, oh, wait, what jurisdiction is this person in? Oh, we have 157 countries represented on the blockchain. Do I need 157 versions of my purchase agreement? It's like, no, we'll never get anything done then. So the idea is to have one common law, one common uniform contract we all signed on to in a context within which we can understand and interpret that law. So you have, if you and I agree to a particular arbitration forum, that's just the one forum, not 157 times 157 in a weird grid that we have to sort out. The idea was to simplify and unify, not to complexify and make impenetrable.
No, that gives a lot of that's great that you mentioned how it's focused on property on the blockchain, and that it's really the Constitution. Maybe it's terminology, but the idea that there's
just as easily have been called an association agreement.
Exactly. That might have been because it's under the same contract space. So right. There's the DApp layer contract here that is more on an equal footing as this Constitution, but we could call it what was your term? Just some sort of agreement, whatever it is.
An association agreement.
Association agreement.
There's a way in which our blockchain is kind of like a big private club, and you enter into it when you buy tokens, and you can leave by selling your tokens. And if you own tokens and transact, which you don't have to. You could own tokens in Kraken or Binance or something, and that you technically own them, but they're the ones who have custody, and they're the ones who are blockchain members.
But we it could be also a company, and then there would be
a party. Absolutely. Remember that both individuals and companies can sign contracts. Sure.
Yeah, if we would have.
Vila, your connection is we can hear you, so go ahead. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay. I can take the video off, so
okay.
That might help. If you need to type your question, that's totally fine.
Can you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
You're a little choppy, but I can hear you.
Okay, so we would have had the same problems of this weird company status if DAO wouldn't have been hacked, because with DAO you would have the same clash with your own jurisdiction, and then the contract that you make with the company which doesn't exist anywhere, like the DAO. So here we would have same kind of experiment. We hold shares of a company that doesn't exist, and we get paid in the same shares of the company that doesn't exist. It will be really interesting. I will let you guys know in 1 year or 2 years what our tax office thinks about this.
No, I don't, Thomas, if you want to answer. I was just gonna maybe no, it is interesting. I am very interested in DAOs and DACs and how they will interact with our legal system, and if it can be, and this was a thought that if it is contractual, if you have all of your users and let's say shareholders under a contract with this DAO entity on a blockchain, would that suffice? Would it kind of prevent external, I guess, regulation or restrictions, or could you do that?
To what extent are you freeing yourself from local entanglements? It's a great question. Norton Rose Fulbright wrote a pretty detailed analysis. They're an international law firm that has a blockchain practice out of London. And Norton Rose Fulbright wrote a multi-page, detailed analysis of, and this was I saw the first copy of this back in January or February. And they released it finally right around launch time in June in its final form. But they did an analysis of how do you have a governed blockchain? What would be necessary? And they actually laid out, from their analysis, a whole set of criteria of, the blockchain would have to have these things. And one of the things was, they called it a constitution, could have called it a charter or whatever, some sort of foundation document that would have to have the power of contract. And each person transacting would have to be a party to that contract and thus agreeing to be bound to it. There's Yves LaRose playing like super utility player. There's the link to the Norton Rose Fulbright legal analysis of the governed blockchain. Dude, I can't tell you, Yves LaRose is my hero in so many ways. He saved my butt in Seoul when the typhoon came through and I was going to be stuck out in the overcrowded, everybody's flights delayed terminal, and he got me into the KAL luxury lounge with his last pass that he had. He got me in there, and so the next 6 hours were not horrific for me. They were actually really very nice. So I'm totally in Yves' debt, and because of that I went and got the American Express Platinum card, which has the pass that gets you into the lounges now. So I'll never have to suffer through that, because I can't always count on Yves being there. I can't just follow him around through life. Although here he is having my back yet again.
Thanks, Yves.
So that's a little side story. Sorry about that. I just got the card. I'm kind of excited. And so this analysis that Norton Rose Fulbright wrote was like, okay, if you really want to have governance where you get all your disputes can be resolved inside the context of this blockchain, in this community, if you will, you're going to have to do some stuff. Like, everyone's going to have to agree to it, and it has to establish a contractual framework, and it's going to have binding arbitration, because, and this, I didn't know this originally. I learned about this as I was absorbing the EOS thinking, that over 150 countries around the world have all signed something called the Arbitration Act. It's almost always called that in every country. And they're all modeled off of the same sample law that was written in the 1950s at the United Nations. And it was codified in something called the New York Convention of 1958, I think it was. And they've revised it a bunch of times, like the most recently in 2008. And what it says is that if a country passes this act, then that country promises that they will respect the arbitration decisions that come from other countries, and they won't step in with their own laws. But they'll only do that under certain circumstances.
Well, that's really interesting. I tried to find that for reference for us, but apparently there have been a couple of those New York conventions. So, but yeah, that sounds really interesting, and yeah, I would need to study that a bit more.
Yeah, it is fascinating that that arbitration is pretty powerful if we kind of take advantage of it.
If you jump through the hoops, then your arbitration can, basically say, the local court will say, oh, you're coming to us because you lost at arbitration and you want us to give you like a second shot at it. But here in Azerbaijan or Korea or China or the United States or wherever, we have this law that says if you're a party to a contract and the contract establishes binding arbitration, and if the arbitration essentially follows the rules of UNCITRAL, the UN Convention on International Trade Law, then we in this court, in this jurisdiction, we will respect that finding and your dispute is settled. Now, that doesn't always hold true. I think it's Norway forbids consumers from giving away their legal rights into binding arbitration with vendors to consumers, but business to business, I think Norway's still covered. And so I'd be curious to know whether that might be an area where it would get squishy for us. But for most countries, I believe, it's true that if it can be proved that you entered into a contract with another party and you both agreed to binding arbitration and you got your arbitration and you lost, and the arbitration wasn't flawed in some way, then the local court's going to say, yep, you had your day in court, you got your arbitration, we are going to stand by the arbitration ruling. And that can sound scary to people, but the alternative is to be hauled into local court in 150 countries around the world, in which case you can't really do business, in which case you don't do business. And so you just shut down and you don't sell internationally, in which case we may as well not have a community because we can't transact.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Marcin is writing something. I need to pause and.
Yeah, he has a couple. So I guess let's start with the first one.
Oh,
maybe.
Yeah. Well, Marcin says that just because you sign up for arbitration doesn't mean there's only one entity to do arbitration. Oh my God, you're absolutely correct. There should be dozens, hundreds of different forums that are all UNCITRAL compatible, any one of which, as long as you are within the bounds of UNCITRAL, which are very, very clear, simple boundaries, you have to be substantially fair and a few other things. But, I could do, Marcin and I could set up, Marcin and Thomas, arbitrators at large, and you could hire us and we'd arbitrate for you. And as long as we followed UNCITRAL rules, man, it'd be golden. It'd be binding, it'd be final. We have to not screw it up, of course, but you wouldn't have to go to ECAF or any other place. And I'm hoping and expecting that people like SageWise and OpenLaw.io and others take some of their Ethereum-based dispute resolution marketplaces and bring them into EOS. So not everyone has stuck with just ECAF or nothing, because right now they're kind of like the ones everyone knows about, but you are not required to use ECAF. Your contract can name any valid arbitration forum you like, including one you've set up for your universe. And as long as you and your contracting co-party both agree to it, boom, you're done. You're fine. You can agree to disagree any way you like.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to be careful with this because I don't want to advertise anything, but I will paste a link that I recently bumped into. It's ULEX, and they they aim to build kind of mini law in the sense that international parties and parties with no established or no well established laws could have commerce. So they also have this very lightweight arbitration mechanism that both parties choose one judge each, and then those select the third judge, and then they decide. So it's really lightweight to set up.
Yeah,
So
if you haven't read the ULEX proposal, it's really interesting. I'm really glad VA brought it up.
yeah, I was gonna say the same thing because and I'll also mention that this is more of a broader legal framework, and not only deals with. I mean, it's actually not a contract law type arbitration. This is actually a new legal framework that points out a restatement of common law and some business code that they refer to, that this organization, created. And anyway, so it's more of a broader legal framework. And so this is kind of interesting because we have contract law and then we have criminal common law. And if we want a new kind of almost nation state type organization, it would probably, I mean, ULEX might be a good broad legal framework to use. So it's kind of funny how, and this is, okay, this is the reason why I think this is also important, because theft is actually not under contract law, or I don't believe it is, right? It's like you can put it as part of a contract, but it's not normally under contract law. And
yeah, it's interesting. So then the question is, like, if I claim that so-and-so stole my tokens, what does an arbitrator even do with that? You know, and the best I think an arbitrator could do is say, well, you would have, you know, you're disputing title, and you're disputing title within the context of the blockchain title, like whose key belongs to these tokens, or whose key belongs to this contract or these digital assets or whatever. And you could arbitrate that if all parties agreed to it, but they don't have to, right? I mean, I could say to somebody, look, what you're asking me to defend is beyond the scope of what's appropriate to handle in arbitration. And I think an arbitrator would be really puzzled as to whether to take that on as a contract case or not. You have the issue of standing, really.
Yeah, no, and that's the interesting point, because I think, and it goes, you know, one of the biggest values I think you can have in the blockchain ecosystem, and that's, you know, it's contrary to traditional, what we had before about, you know, blockchains and immutability, is that, you know, for account recovery, that's a huge usability issue. I mean, people.
Oh, yeah, it was promised to be a built-in part of the software back in the very first white paper. And it was repeated in the second white paper. You will have account recovery, and there isn't any account recovery features built in currently.
Yeah.
I have to correct something John C. wrote.
Is my mic working, Jude?
Yeah. John, you could go ahead and we can hear you.
Jem answered correctly. That he said John had said that Thomas supports opt-in arbitration.
There is a clear agreement by parties to arbitration. So when you talk about members of the blockchain, and I'm talking specifically about the blockchain, the current, under the current constitution, members, you know, how did they sign to say they agreed to?
Right. How would anybody demonstrate that a party had agreed?
If we use Kleos, for example, I'm not checking a box to say I agree, I've read the constitution. I'm just using a line command. So where is this agreement for arbitration between parties? It's just unclear. And also, I think we have to respect the fact that the current constitution on the mainnet blockchain was changed from what was produced by Block 1. There was a change that took place during the launch period. So we could argue that the whole constitution is basically invalid, the whole interim.
Well, you could try to argue that. I have several counter arguments. I don't know that they would.
We would stand as an argument, and you bring contract law into it, and then we have to say, well, where are the agreements of the parties? And something that was mentioned earlier by Vil is that this line of, you know, what are the lack of definition, what are members, what constitutes a member in terms of the constitution. And there's also, what is ECAF? You know, it's just, who is ECAF? It's just a name that's been put in there. So I think in terms of what we currently have, we do need something better, and likely something that people do agree with more broadly, that's being voted on. And what
I will absolutely stipulate that A, we can do even better, and B, we shouldn't ratify it.
Okay.
I think we can definitely find common ground there. And there's a difference between explaining how something came to be and saying that it's perfect and we shouldn't change it. I will never say that the current constitution is flawless and it should never be changed. That's no.
On that in the channels.
And I also think that the original proposal that every transaction would have the constitution hash was a good one, but apparently it was never implemented.
I challenged Dan on that fairly late in the game, and it was one of a number of things that we ended up not implementing as originally designed. His claim to, as I recall, I don't want to, I could be paraphrasing him incorrectly, but as I recall Dan explaining it to me, he said that when you transact, you are always using TAPOS, transaction as proof of stake. You basically, in your transaction, you're referencing a hash of a prior block state. It prevents replay attacks. And when you reference a prior block, you're including in that by reference everything that was in that prior block, including the constitution that was active at that time. So rather than having a hash, you got a reference. It's like, is that really the same? But but you still have to fall back on but did you ever tell people they were agreeing with that? Where's the check mark? Where's the signature? And it would have been absolutely much better if we had had a standard that said, you have to agree to the constitution when you first connect with a user account, and we keep a little file on your local drive that doesn't prompt you a second time, but if you don't store the file, you get prompted every time. And if you don't say yes, you can't connect. I mean, that would have been the smart way to do it. We didn't do it that way. And if I had it to do over, that's absolutely what I would do. I would have absolutely required people to explicitly agree. And that explicit agreement is not in place. And that's a problem. And I've dominated the conversation far too much. I'm sorry. I did not mean to take up all the talking time. And I'm being called away to another meeting now. So thank you for allowing me to crash.
No, thank you.
No, thanks a lot for joining us, Thomas. Really appreciate it. And
love you guys. Love hanging out. I'm happy to come back anytime.
All right, please drop in.
Yeah.
All right, have a good one.
Yeah.
So, so we have, that was great. So we have extra, Marcin, if maybe because you've been saying a lot, or Eve, if you want to get on the video, let me know. We can invite you in. We could get up to 4 people. So right now we have Vile, John, and myself. Are you guys still there?
Yep.
Okay,
I'm
so
here.
you guys are still there. Anybody out in the audience that want to get on video to participate in the video chat? And then we'll go through all the comments too. I think we've been behind with all the comments in the chat. So where we've, I think John, you mentioned, let me see. Okay, so so there was this idea about the agreements about arbitration, and it seems Thomas mentioned how that is true. There is no there's no hash right now, but technically there is something that refers to a constitution, but it should be more explicit, that people are maybe either clicking something or signing something, whatever it is. So hopefully we could find a good, easy, usable interface to do that. So let me see. Let me read the comments here. Jem, there cannot be anything criminal here. Arbitration for a crime can only deal with the property. Criminal issues need to go to a terrestrial forum. Yeah, I agree. This is mainly as far as what we're discussing is contract law, and criminal issues can be dealt. But the difficulty with that, I think, Jem, if you're still there, is that all these theft issues that there's thousands of cases right now that are, and even more that I think are expecting some resolution. And if it is considered more under criminal law, I think that's unfortunate, because if we can use something like ULIX that Ville mentioned, which is a broader legal framework, we can eventually arbitrate or judge on even criminal law, or under, it's under common law. So anyway, so maybe it's outside the scope. It probably is, but I think in the future it's something to think about. But in the immediate, like kind of in the present, we have issues that it's, these aren't contracts, these thefts, phishing attacks, they're not contracts. I'd hope to have all of them made whole somehow, because I think
they're alleged crimes, I guess.
Okay.
It's one way to look at it. And the freezing of accounts is questionable, because that is in effect policing. Okay.
Yeah, it is. No, I agree with that. And I think it does. I mean, you're sacrificing this immutability. I don't know if Marcin is here, but I mean, I understand too.
Centralization for arbitration in many respects. And that's one of the things that I think version 2 addresses.
Okay. So let's get Marcin in here too, just because I know he's really big on the immutability of blockchains. And so Marcin, I invited you, and so John, I mean, that's interesting though, because hey, how's it going, Marcin?
Hey, hello.
Hey, Marcin.
Very good.
Hello, Marcin.
Hey, how are you doing? Yeah.
So I guess that was some of the questions. Were all your questions answered? I guess you made a few comments here about, I think account recovery you mentioned, there's owner and active key.
Yeah, Thomas was mentioning that there is no account recovery, and I believe in graphene this is what is referred to as account recovery, and it's a very powerful feature that that I even know this for a fact that a lot of block producers were unaware of, and they were using their owner key to sign things where they should have just used the active key. So whenever your active key, which has the same permissions as the owner key, gets compromised, you can revoke it with your owner key and change it. And so this is how you can recover your account. You keep your owner key in a safe in your wherever, and you never use it except for these emergency situations and there you can use that to recover your account. It doesn't mean to freeze the stuff that's already been stolen, but technically that is account recovery, and it's a very powerful feature in EOS. So that was my comment, because Thomas mentioned that there isn't such a thing.
So that is a better level of protection, because you are able to use kind of a hotkey, cold key system, but ultimately, and it's beyond even, we have so many thefts, right? But beyond that, the biggest issue is going to be people are going to lose or forget their passwords. This happens in crypto from the very beginning. I mean, and this is one of also Ian's point, and I kind of agree, is that, you know, you're talking about 20 to 30% of people who've probably forgot their Bitcoin keys. And whether it's an owner or active key, which helps, especially for hacking, most people are just going to forget. And that's actually probably the most challenging issue for mainstream adoption of blockchain technology. I would say that's the number one.
I'd actually argue that, you know, that this statistic about 20 to 30%, this might be a little bit overblown, especially that some of it relates to the early days of Bitcoin. And I think this was calculated using the stale accounts that have never been touched for a really long time. But a lot of the early Bitcoin that got locked up like that, I think people weren't exactly understanding the gravitas of Bitcoin at the time. So it was fairly easy to forget your password when something was worth, you know, $7 at the time, and it was already like 500 Bitcoins were worth $7 or something. Like later on, when this got blown up and all of a sudden it's worth millions, the people who've forgotten, I don't think that statistic would hold today. Knowing
that's a very good point.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's very easy to sort of like, you know, put together all these facts that sound spectacular, but when you investigate it up close, it doesn't exactly hold water. And this is what I think has been happening in crypto a lot, that you have to be careful with these kind of conclusions. And also
account recovery, Marcin, the inherent properties of Ethereum meant that there was no account recovery for the initial accounts. Is that correct? There was no.
I'm not super familiar. I'm not super familiar with Ethereum. I think there was. There was. They had the passwords were single entities.
In Parity, in Parity, you still have the option to import the kind of a Genesis key, if we would call it so. But yeah, I think also that there wasn't mechanism to recover because back then keys were taught as Bitcoin keys, like you that's your responsibility and you should keep that in safe place. But I could be Jem's voice here for a while, because what Jem is referring to with the comment that recovery is not what was referred to. He means that this recovery is about keys and not accounts, basically. So Marcin is right. You can have all kinds of implementations on top of the account structure with the permissions and even other smart contracts. But still, the key recovery is lacking, and I believe, as Jem, I believe that Thomas was referring to that. But it's something that is really hard to implement in foolproof way, I think, because it's always hard to prove that this was my account. In Genesis accounts on EOS, you could try to prove that with your Ethereum key, but then if you have that,
goes off chain,
then we could use probably
following a chain that takes you off the EOS blockchain into Ethereum land, and it becomes policing.
So I'll also just maybe in terms of the clarification between accounts and keys, I'll probably have to think about it a little bit. But to follow up with Marcin, so maybe the percentage is a lot less, maybe 5, 10% or 15, but it is one of the biggest problems, because when I look at the cryptocurrency ecosystem, when you look at that, you talk about institutions, the biggest problem they have in getting their money in the system is custody, and custody is all about keys, right? So how are these institutions that were going to put billions in this ecosystem, what are they doing? They could go to Coinbase and they get charged 1% per month, right, for custodying their assets, their crypto investments. And so this is the biggest issue. And so they're very afraid that there's going to be a large hack that compromises their entire portfolio of investments. And so I think, I agree, maybe it's not as, in terms of percentage, as great. But if you look at just in terms of usability for not only, for people with high, large investments, and just regular people too, it's the same problem. I mean, people are going to worry, and that's their biggest concern, I think, right now. It's at least one of the top 3 concerns institutions have. So that's just my 2 cents there. But anyways.
Yeah, I also think that, it's a good point that we just heard, that it's actually extremely hard to prove that even if you have forgotten your key, that was actually your key. That this is a fundamental problem that isn't easy to solve, like regardless of the angle we apply to it. Because if I claim that, whichever one of those frozen Bitcoin accounts is mine, and even if I go to a Bitcoin ECAF that is there, what kind of evidence should I present to persuade anybody if I don't actually hold that key? And this is I think it might actually be impossible to solve. And maybe there is some recourse, and maybe I would also seek this in technology rather than in any kind of human intervention, because I fail to see a way to hear someone out and say, yeah, I think you have convinced me. Okay, like, have these Bitcoins. This evidence.
I think we have one. Sorry, I think we have one huge dependency here, which is the ID cards,
yes,
or electronic identity. When we can link more people their legal identities to keys, then this can be solved. Then I can always insert my card, put my PIN, and sign a message that this is my account, and then this problem could be solved. But I agree with Marcin on this, that we need a technological solution for this to happen. But unfortunately, guys, I have to go now. It's 1:20 a.m. here, so I need to go. But thank you very much. Should I put the link for our Telegram? What do you think about that?
We could probably. It's up to you. We can have a separate Telegram group, but we can just I mean, it's up to you. Maybe the governance channel hasn't been as active, so I'm thinking, okay, do we need an extra Telegram group for this? so I think if we get into more specific working groups, smaller working groups, then I think that may make sense. But for now, we'll probably just kind of continue to do this weekly and see what the demand and interest is. I think people are telegrammed out as well. So another Telegram would. But once we get into small groups, I think it makes sense. Like if we're drafting things and just if we have a smaller 5 to 7 person group, we can do that. So, but Ville, it's great to hear your insights and thanks.
So thank you guys. Thank you all 15 of us. I think that includes me also. I don't know, but thank you everyone, and let's meet next week then.
Yes, sounds good, Ville. So and I think that's a technological solution, and I know Jem said kind of human intervention and arbitration can help with that. But the one thing I heard of is, Dan and his his new wallet, or block one, and Dan includes some sort of identification that's Sybil proof. And this could be, I would think, revolutionary if that happens. And it would be what yeah.
I think actually this is where because I think like silence on Dan's part in block ones, I kind of interpret it like this, that I think they're probably working hard to put an end to this little, wouldn't call it a crisis, but this debate of ours, because I think a lot of it can be solved with clever technology, and that was the original intention. Not open up this field of, chasing small theft around with overruling orders. We had a actually very interesting conversation with Ian Grigg today, also on a call earlier on, which got recorded, but only, I think partially, only first half was recorded, and then we kind of stuck around and kept talking. And it was brought up there that the actual ECAF arbitration over theft, it might be extremely inefficient because thieves move too quickly. If I'm able to take your tokens, I'll cash them in within the next 5 minutes. And there is no way you can stop me with an arbitration order, because whatever ECAF orders after a while, and then the block producers have to implement it, that usually takes a little bit of time. So this is a very interim state that I think got conceived mostly on this assumption that when the tokens were getting converted from the Ethereum to EOS, like there was this very specific case that we could solve like that, where things got locked in and someone else was trying to claim them, and we could stop that. But this is going to be a thing of the past really soon. So I don't think there's a way to stop theft using arbitration overruling of accounts. It simply isn't aligned with this functionality, and I think what it does more is it questions the immutability of EOS blockchain to the outside world, which of course isn't mathematical immutability, but the perceived one, that there is someone that can come over and just fiddle with the registers. So I think it's quite harmful, given the fact that there's very little useful cases for that when it comes to real theft. Because when we take business disputes, for example, that's a completely different story. Like business disputes would usually have an arbitrator everybody agrees upon before transacting. And then this whole field, again, is clean. There is no dispute here. Like if I and anyone else agrees upon an arbitrator, then it's fine. We don't have to have this argument at all. So this was with Ian Grigg. We spoke about this in depth too.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your comment about that, and it does seem this whole snapshot ERC20 conversion to EOS tokens is a special situation. So, but for regular theft on an ongoing basis, it may be very difficult to enforce. So that's a good point. I mean, what are we talking about? And can we implement something like that? I see a couple, freezing, Jem says freezing is required, thus freezing required and available only when thief is in a 3-day unstaking period. So maybe that's something to think about. There's also perceived advantage of people outside knowing that theft on EOS blockchain would be dealt with. So yeah, I guess there's a couple perceptions, that are strong, that, hey, this EOS blockchain is protecting.
Can I just Jem's comment about unstaking and freezing? Actually, forgive me my ignorance, because this technicality is perfectly familiar with. But to my understanding, if my tokens get unstaked and the timer starts moving, my process and revoke my active key with my owner key. And then this does not require an ECAF ruling or freezing or anything. actually. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought this was the way it was implemented.
Okay, so Jim, if you can answer that. Yeah, the 3-day unstaking period, the details of that, because if you indeed use your active key and not the owner key, or if you didn't have both as non-identical keys. Maybe, I don't know if, Marcin, maybe you can explain what Eve just wrote.
I think most of the frozen accounts were inherited accounts with just the one set of keys.
Yeah.
There was no owner.
Yeah, but like to my, this was possible to do without any arbitration. Because the owner and the active key, they were designed for that also, for this purpose, that this situation would happen, that my account is getting attacked and somebody's trying to unstake it, and I already see it happening, which is very easy to set up. I already have a Telegram. I have a bot that informs me about every operation in my. This is quite available right now. So if my tokens get unstaked, I see a warning that this is happening. So from this conversation, what I'm getting is that I could either file a case in ECAF and have them freeze my account, or I can just revoke the active key and restake my tokens. And that would put an end to that. And I think this is a wallet functionality that is probably going to get implemented by Block 1 like sometime soon, I'm guessing, because I think this is what they're working on. So also this is another one of my points, that a lot of these things, they're just going to get cleaned up when a proper wallet gets released. And so some of these structures that we're putting up right now to prevent certain, a little bit rushed, maybe in good intentions, of course, but I don't think it's necessary to assemble all these constructs before we see these existing mechanisms put to good use.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think it is good to even dive into those details. You know, how is this going to be implemented? If it may be too difficult, but it really depends. And maybe it's and I do agree. I mean, if the practical implementation of account or key recovery is difficult, even the perception of preventing thefts, if we can't implement it feasibly, then it probably wouldn't make any sense. So it is, and I do, Marcin, I do agree. Like in the blockchain world, this is like sacrilegious what we're even proposing. So it is something to be.
I think we have to weigh the. I think to weigh the what can be won and what can be lost, like when we go down this rabbit hole, because what we're advocating for is that this robustness, it should outlast us. Like it doesn't matter who's in ECAF, it doesn't matter who's in these codes. We can be, 15 years from now we can be dead or doing something completely different, and there's different people having these conversations. So this technology must be robust enough to withstand that change, and even over the period of, say, next 7 or 20 months, when suppose, I wouldn't like to see that happen, but if the crypto took a very deep correction and a lot of tokens changed hands, and we had a completely different set of VPs ruling EOS like 5 years from now or even 20 months, it still should be robust. It still should be sound. We shouldn't have to rely so much on individuals that have these notions and decisions and thinking, okay, like let's freeze this, let's not freeze that. And there is this constitution, that constitution. And I think a lot of the original intention that Dan had when EOS was getting put up, it was sort of like revolving around these concepts on how to do this with the minimum amount of human intervention and the maximum robustness. And there was, of course, a certain amount of events that needed human intervention. So for this, we have the block producers and the possibility of an ECAF that has certain powers. And we're not advocating to completely, remove it, gut it, and demolish it, but we think it should be minimized.
Okay. No, that's a great case. And then Yves, I invited you just in case you wanted to respond, but you made a lot of comments, which on the other side, which, just for clarification too, is that, I think Dan's solution is for iOS users, which accounts for 20% of all mobile users. So Android users, at least from what I understand too, it's like Dan's solution is for mobile iOS. So, but anyway, so we could go through it. So that's one of his points. Rogby says, if I get hacked and my EOS are being unstaked, can I immediately stake them again, or will I have to wait until the 3 days unstaking is over?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I would think that you can restake it, because it would be a very obvious thing to do if I see that someone did it for me and I revoke the keys, but I don't know. I would have to ask my guys.
And I think
our techs.
Did Jem answer this? He said you cannot restake during wait period. The only thing you can do is change keys. Does that answer more so?
Well, if I do change keys, then after the unstake, the thief cannot do anything. So technically speaking, it actually solves the problem. It may sound a little bit scary because my tokens did get unstaked, but you can't do anything with them. So I can just restake it after they're unstaked.
So Jen mentions, Marcin advocates the ideal we should work towards. Absolutely agree. But too much is missing now. It is unreasonable for most users. So that's a comment. And then Yves also mentioned that said, okay, he quotes Dan. Maybe we could read that, I guess. That said, we must also have a system for correcting unauthorized transfer via theft or default on contract. The system must be robust against subjective and ambiguous situations. For this reason, we agree in advance that disputes may be resolved by a defined process, and that the outcome of this process may be the reallocation of property. Everyone is secure so long as the process has proper checks and balances to prevent the process from being corrupted. So that might be a quote from like Dan a while back. And I think maybe, Yves, can you clarify that? It was probably not a recent statement.
Yeah, I think that's what he means by saying it's a quote from Dan. It definitely is a quote from Dan.
No, it's a quote from Dan, but it was probably a previous quote. I think Dan might have updated his thoughts on this kind of recovery because the version 2 actually does not probably disagrees with that kind of thought, right? So anyways, it is. I think it'll still be a fascinating debate to see, and Marcin, I think for the long term, I do agree that maybe if we can eventually get there technologically, that it may not be good to sacrifice that in the short run. If there's other ways, like I think Dan mentioned, let's just refund everybody who's gotten, who was a victim of theft, and that. So yeah,
it would.
Yeah,
there was greater damage caused to the community due to arbitration than the actual overall cost of the value of the thefts. So, in other words, it would have been reimbursing through, I don't know, WPS fund or something as probably less costs to the damage caused through arbitration. But on the point of arbitration, I think with no clear agreement, opt-in arbitration, whether, and these are all theft allegations, whether there is a a claim counter to the claims of theft or not, if there is no agreed arbitration, no clearly defined arbitration, there is the question of where is the theft? Is the theft the freezing of accounts, or is the theft the alleged stealing of the keys? We can see that accounts are frozen, and that is on public record. But the stealing of the keys is subjective. So it's very, very, I don't know, very legally treading water, I would suppose, if something like this was to go to court. I mean, if there's a large account that's frozen, the party counter to that, if they've not made any counter on the arbitration, it would be prudent not to. If there was if they didn't feel that they were bound by it, it might be that they'll let you go through, freeze the account, reimburse the funds, and then somebody lands up in court.
Yeah, these are very tricky issues, John, and it's good that you had insights into ECAF and probably have maybe a stronger perspective on exactly what these cases are all about, and so it is interesting So Eve, I know you said you're running around. If you want a video invite, let me know. Just feel free, and then I can invite you in. But yeah, so these are all very kind of interesting issues. So let's see. Rogby has Jem has he mentioned, hey, if we are kind of compensating the victims, what does that do to sit with the fringe libertarian? Hey, I'm a libertarian, actually. I'm not gonna, yeah, but anyway, so probably I don't want to talk too much about that, but so yeah, that is an issue as well. I mean, if you're going to kind of subsidize this kind of collectively, I mean, is what is, how does that fit in with kind of libertarian philosophy? It's interesting to think about. So yeah, I don't have an answer to that at this point, but I do think that if there's we have worker proposals that are that's through referenda can allocate funds, and that could be used for many purposes to increase the value of this entire ecosystem. So in that respect, if there is agreement and consensus, that's one way. That's just an alternative. I don't think libertarians would be too I think, disappointed if everyone agrees. But it depends. I think there would probably be a few that disagree with that. But let's see. Rogby says, is another detailed question about private keys to the Genesis account. Is there a way to just change the private key, owner key, to a Genesis account or any account, or would we just have to go to arbitration at the point or move funds to a different account? Can someone answer that? I'm just like learning this about the details.
Default arbitration, it creates an expectation that you can go to your local police station and have something done on chain, and that's just not the case. Even in real life, if you go to your local police station, the chances are that something wouldn't be done unless you complete a mountain of paperwork and provide enough evidence to show they would. But so it creates this expectation that if your keys are stolen or if something happens to your account, no problem, go to arbitration.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, and that's it's good to get the clarity, because it may be a lot harder. Hey, how's it going, Eve?
Hey, thanks for the invite.
No need to even keep a copy of your password, because if you lose it, you can go to an arbitrator and they'll fix it for you.
Yeah, so John makes a good point about perception too. I mean, it may be far more difficult to deliver on this recovery and arbitration process than most people are led to believe. And I didn't know the details. These are all very tricky issues to resolve, it seems, practically. So, Yves, is there any pressing points?
There's always something pressing. No, I think this is really interesting. I think the format and the discussions that have been going on for the last hour or so, or 40 minutes or so, have been really interesting. The one thing that I thought was interesting, Marcin, maybe you want to touch on that again. So in terms of account recovery, when it was mentioned in the white paper, my impression was not that of just the active and owner key. So yeah, active and owner key does permit us to, if you're aware of how to do that, and if you're knowledgeable on how to do that, does enable you to recover and change if indeed your tokens are staked at the time and you have that 72-hour period, and then you're able to make the change before those are unstaked, etc. Was that your impression of what Dan was talking about in the white paper? What Block One was talking about in the white paper was just the active owner key pairing? That's it? Because that was not my impression at all, based on videos, on a bunch of readings. Account recovery was something that was way more user-friendly than what the current capabilities are.
Yeah, well, definitely it was to be made much more user-friendly than it is now. If you use Kleos, like hardly anybody knows how to use.
If you know how to use Kleos, then that's the least of your problems. Then
it's probably it's like 0.01% probably of EOS users know how to use Kleos, and so what I do think was the intention was to make the whatever Kleos does at a touch of a button, and then it does actually become that. And this is what I think is actually a wallet away, something that we're waiting for right now, and we're kind of like in the desert, waiting for the water to come. But it's not very complicated per se, using the functionalities that we have now. And once again, I would like to probably rephrase this point that against not regular thefts, any sort of arbitration ruling is too slow. So it cannot actually help. And therefore, we see it as a sort of a dead end that will open up a lot of doubts and this kind of FUD, so to speak.
I see it on the other side of the coin,
won't
though.
Actually fix much.
The idea is that, so you're deeply involved with EOS. You know the intricacies of how blacklisting works currently, where the 21 need to, well, actually more than 21, all the block producers, even the standby block producers, need to include the blacklist in case they're called up to block produce. And we've seen that in the past where people had not. I think it was Story EOS that did that once. So I would imagine that eventually that will be changed either through sudo, where you'll have the 15 on 21, and it'll just be put in, and you won't have to get everybody on there. But moving past that, I think because you're aware of all the intricacies of how ECAF works and what the challenges would be in terms of time frame for potentially stopping theft, I'm not convinced that the average thief that's not, I don't think will ever stop theft. So regardless of this, I think people will always still try if there's a chance. But I think the amount of people that would come to EOS to try and potentially steal tokens would be greatly reduced if there's even the perception that if they tried, something could happen to them. Just just the perception, or just the thought that they might be exposed, or that they might be caught, or that there is a system in place by default, I think will veer away a lot of potential theft, even though in practice it might be very difficult to stop them. And what it might do as well on the other side of the coin is it might attract people that understand that there's no way that you're ever going to be able to negate all theft So I still go out and I still buy a bike lock to put on my bike, even though I know that some people, if they really want to steal my bike, they'll bring a chain clamp and they'll just cut the chain off. But I still go and buy the chain, and I still decide to buy that, to ride my bicycle and to lock it up, because the thought that I might veer away most of the thieves that might come, because they might not have that chain lock cutter type of thing. So I think that just that perception is really, really powerful.
Yeah, as long as it works in our favor, because this is the bit that I'm not so sure about. Because what I think happens is the thieves, like when they're like real properties, they're usually quite well informed as to, you know, like when you watch me trying to open a car that isn't mine, it'll take me probably like 45 minutes and I'll just walk away. When you watch a real thief do that, it'll take them like 15 seconds. They just know their way around it.
But in that example, they might not target your car if they know that it has an anti-theft device in it built in, because it's just harder. So it's just like, I'm in Canada, and so we use this example a lot. If you're in the woods and you encounter a bear, you don't need to run faster than the bear. You just need to run faster than your friend that's beside you. That's it. So this example in here would just be that if EOS is by default designed that it's just harder for people to come and try to steal something, they might just target another chain instead. Just that perception is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, but what I argue with is the source of this perception. It does not come from trying to freeze an account for a thief that generally moves very quickly. Because if I take someone's tokens, like before they realize that, before they log in again, I'll have cashed it out on Bitfinex or Binance and whatever and be long gone. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the arbitration in this context, it isn't actually an applicable tool. It's not more like a bike lock. It's something else, you know. It's a bike lock would actually stop a thief or reconsider and just take the bike next to your bike that doesn't have a lock.
Yeah, so they'd go and try to steal tokens on another blockchain instead of this one.
Yeah, but the thing is that they're just as easy to steal and just as easy to cash in, and ECAF doesn't stop them.
No, ECAF, I don't think, and even Ian said that, the ECAF is not intentioned. The intention of ECAF is not to stop thieves. That's not the intention. Same thing with the bicycle.
Yeah,
I mean, this bicycle thing might be a terrible example, but in where I live, you can also register. Yeah, John's like, yeah, this is a terrible example. You can register your bicycle with the city as well, and you can put the city actually. You can go to the police station, and the city will actually put a number on it, so to verify that this is indeed your bicycle. And it doesn't stop thieves. The thief would come, steal your bicycle, just go sell it at a pawn shop. Fair enough. But if there are a bunch of bicycles around, some have locks, some are shitty locks, some are better locks, and then some of them have this little VIN plate, whatever thing, they might just go to one that's just easier to steal. And I think that that's the powerful, the perception is that if in EOS by default we have this system that could potentially, yes, it's going to be very difficult, and yes, even Ian said that it won't be applicable in most cases. The thieves will get away with the funds. But if it can stop the amount of people coming onto the chain because of that perception that something could happen to them, then I think that in itself is return on investment enough to try and do that. Notwithstanding that we should have other arbitration, we should have opt-in, we should have registered forms, etc. That's a must. I just don't see why both can't coexist.
Can I just say, I think with that scenario, the picture you're painting there is one where the majority of people probably wouldn't bother putting locks on their bikes because they would have the expectation that there would be recourse.
I would say that we're putting a lock on the bike by default, so that every bike comes with a lock, and it comes with multiple locks because, like Marcin said, there's also the private key, the owner key. So you're just putting as many steps as possible, or as many different options or different things as possible to try and prevent theft. None of them will be successful to prevent all theft.
My point is, it's for the owners of the bikes to know the combinations or carry the keys for those locks, and to see that they are applied properly.
There is owner responsibility for sure.
Yeah, if we create an environment where there's this expectation that they don't worry about that. I can go to the police and they will freeze whoever my bike and I'll get it back. Then people probably won't take that responsibility on to carry the locks and to keep the combination.
I don't think the message that it would be sending is don't worry about it, we've got you covered. It's, hey, look at this blockchain. We're implementing as many features as we can to try and prevent theft. You still have responsibility. At the end of the day, you're still responsible.
Well, I think it's really in the detail. So I think this is kind of what we're sometimes glazing over a little bit. Like, what exactly does it do? What is the trade-off? Like, how does the public see the conclusion that we arrive at? And what is the solution? Because if you do introduce this sort of an intervention body that can freeze accounts, but still its actual usability is very small because it cannot really stop a thief that moves within like 15 minutes. He will be gone anyway. And every paper that is going to cover this on EOS, published by, I don't know, whoever's from Ethereum or Cardano, they will point it out. And it will proliferate.
If we remove ECAF as a default, they'll point out that we're inviting thieves to come over and steal shit for free.
Oh, I'm not
They're incentivized to attack EOS. They'll figure out whatever it is.
I'm not sure they will point that out because they have been actually pointing out the exact opposite, that this is a body that has...
They'll change their tune quickly enough. If it means that their tokens go up in value and they can destroy competition, they'll do whatever it takes.
Maybe it's a fair point that, like, listening to this kind of publicity is not a very informative way to... I mean, not a very well informed way, but what I think we should be doing is knowing for ourselves exactly what it does. Like, is it effective? If it's a sort of a, I would see as a, you put a device on a car that is supposed to do something. It's like some kind of an additional braking mechanism. And it works one time in 10,000 attempts, because this is the only one that the thief didn't get away because, I don't know, he forgot, or his PC froze, or his battery died, and ECAF actually managed to stop it. But that brake is actually really bloody heavy, and it induces a lot of air drag, and the car doesn't run as well, and it's not perceived as an attractive of a vehicle. This is the kind of a trade-off I'm talking about.
And I think that's the perception you're talking of, right? Is that this brake is super heavy and it slows down the car in the long run. It's actually really not a good brake. It's actually a shitty brake. But
I'm actually talking about the facts. No. I would argue here that this is not the perception, that if you break down the process of what happens when a token is stolen and what can ECAF precisely do to stop it, you will, at least from my perspective, you see that it is inefficient. And it is easy to prove mathematically that it is inefficient because it takes too much time for ECAF to interfere with the actual thefts, because it would require them to act within like 4 minutes, probably. I can cash stuff in within that time frame, and so therefore it's it's not a perception thing. It's a matter of fact thing. I would argue that it is so.
Marcin, so can we do a study or analysis on that, or maybe a blog on that specific issue? Because what I'm thinking is, I'm not actually too worried about perception. I mean, we should go down and figure out exactly the facts. Like, what is the process? What is it going to look like? What is the, at least, nothing's going to be perfect, but at least what's the percentages of what we can actually catch out of the however many cases. So if we have that, I think we can make a better decision, because perception, it has to be rooted in a principle and facts, right? And as best we can have, perception is a layer on top that can go either way, right? So if we can have a blog that precisely informs us about this, I think we can all make a better decision about, okay, yeah, this is not practical, right? And or maybe this is doable. Like we'll figure that out.
It is doable. We've got 35 accounts right now that are frozen.
I think Mason was correct that arbitration is slow. The whole process is slow. Ian would confirm that, I'm sure.
It depends, actually, John. A lot of arbitration is now automated.
Yeah, in some cases. But I think if we look at what we've learned that the first initial count freezes, the emergency orders, were carried out by block producers, I believe. And then there was some to-ing and fro-ing before the actual arbitration orders came. So I think there's something to be learned there, that the actual emergency arbitration, the speed was with the actions the block producers took on their own account, I believe.
And Marcin is right, actually. So these specific blacklist accounts that we're talking about were favored in the sense that because of mainnet launch, they were automatically staked. And so you needed to unstake your tokens. And that gave the users that 72-hour grace period. Now, not everybody will have that 72-hour grace period. Correct. That is fair. And so they did have that period of time to be able to, ECAF did have that period of time to do the fact gathering and to be able to send out those orders. Now, not everybody in the future will benefit from that 72-hour period of time. And Marcin is also correct that if you did set up your accounts properly and you do have your active key and your owner key, and my point is that not everybody does. And a lot of block producers for even about a month didn't have separate keys. And if they didn't, and they're experts in the system, I can envision that regular users will not have that in the future. But if you do, Marcin is right, if you do have your active and owner key that are separate, and you put on, you interact with the chain using your active key, if in the event that you have those tokens staked and you've got a bot that alerts you to any transactions on this account, you could then, when they get unstaked by a hacker or somebody who takes over your keys, through your owner key, change the permissions to your active key. That is possible. But what I just described here, I had to be very careful in trying to even use my fingers and my hands to do. Imagine for the average user. And I'm doing this 24/7 all the time for the last 9 months. So for the average user, all this is pretty complicated. This is where I think ECAF can step in, where for the average user, they might be able to help when they're not really aware of what to do. And I don't think they'll stop all of the theft. You're right on that, Marcin, for sure. We won't ever be able to stop all theft.
But for ECAF to be...
it doesn't mean we shouldn't try, is my thing.
It would have to be opt-in, guys, for it to be valid arbitration, I think. I think
right now it is valid because you signed any transaction that you signed.
That it wasn't clear that all parties had agreed. So I think that is probably something we need to fix in the future.
And definitely, so when we do redo the Constitution, that would be something that needs to be addressed. At the same time, I'm not a legal expert, but I do know that ignorance is not a valid argument. So every transaction on the blockchain does sign the Ricardian contract, and it does sign Reg Producer. It does incorporate the Constitution. And so, with not knowing that you're a part of a system that has rules, is not going to stand up in court, unfortunately.
Well,
yeah,
ignorance is not a very good self-defense.
I think this part has been also disputed a lot on many cases, like as to exactly what the mode of appointment of these laws has been and the order and everything. But I don't want to get into that. I think we just need a proper referendum and a properly ratified constitution. But about the arbitration process, I think there is actually a middle ground to this, where it does not require the sort of the default overarching ECAF over every transaction that is signed, and still carries some of the so to speak policing capabilities or protective capabilities that could stop actual thieves from taking your money within even the 5-minute period that it would usually take it to cash in, or even 20 seconds, doesn't matter. And this is a concept that we're developing right now, and I can just like give you a sneak peek of it, where there's a smart contract that is actually owned by the arbitrator, in which you stake your tokens, and from there on, they are locked in that contract. So you transact through it with different participants of that contract, and these tokens are actually there is an internal token within that contract that gets issued when you stake your EOS
kind of like the
edge of that contract. Yes. So
or the
within that, yeah. So within that space, you actually transact with a sort of an ECAF EOS, and over that ECAF EOS, ECAF actually has proper jurisdiction, and it can stop transactions. It can quarantine them until there is no claim on a certain operation. So if I stake my tokens in that ECAF that is a smart contract, and my keys get stolen, and somebody performs a transaction on these ECAF tokens, they first go into the quarantine that could be set for any number of days. I could set it manually to be 6 days and not 3. And then they would have a look, because I would bring the claim that, well, that wasn't me, you know. And then this also solves a big problem on EOS about the token fungibility and unfungibility. If you have many arbitration bodies that can reverse certain transactions, but they have a slightly different jurisdiction and rule set, because that introduces a lot of different EOS tokens that are all called EOS, because they undergo different arbitration bodies. So it's a subtle mechanism, but what it actually does is there is a different pricing on EOS that is coming from different transactions, because you might all of a sudden figure out that this arbitration body is actually quite wonky, and you never know what they're going to rule this time around, and you have just transacted with this person and you have their EOS. So my EOS isn't equal to your EOS, but if you seal it off in a smart contract and have an ECAF EOS traveling inside that smart contract until all the claims are cleared and there is no claim, then only then you can unstake it and revert back to the neutral EOS. And the ECAF contract can be a very powerful business body, a very profitable business also, that governs that particular space. And then the EMAC is another contract like that, and another arbitrator and another one. And these bodies do business together because they are in similar jurisdictions. They are experts in what they do. So you can have different contracts for, you know, maritime trade, like Ian was talking today, or any other kind of a trade. And then you still have the free market, so everybody is incentivized to do well. And the last but not least, actually even the libertarian Ethereum crowd thinks that, my God, if I go on EOS, first of all, I have a super fast Ethereum, and as soon as I'm scared or getting stolen from, are we still online?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Animation stop. So we have the super fast Ethereum, but as soon as I'm endangered, I can stake my tokens into any arbitrator, and he keeps them in something that resembles to some extent a multi-sig wallet or an escrow, because it's a sort of a hybrid functionality of the two that you have in such a smart contract, that all the transactions get sort of quarantined until there is no claim on them, and everybody in that contract agrees that this is their mode of operation. And the slowdown that they experience is the trade-off for security. So there is an actual sort of, from a thief standpoint, it doesn't even make sense to try to steal your tokens when they're there, because he knows that you'll have 6 days to reverse that transaction, and he'll just be left empty-handed. So this is a concept that we're developing right now. Looking for logical loopholes in it, because there may be some, but we're not sure yet. You know, it takes a lot of drawing and animating and just laying things out. But I think this is actually the middle ground on EOS that could merge the free market with the proper property protection that we are all striving for, and not also generate all this bad PR that, you know, that the blockchain is no longer a blockchain. No, it's now a centralized database or whatever, and it's also slow. So this is kind of what I'm trying to conceive right now. It's in 2 weeks now. But
is all of that you described doable with the Constitution version 2 proposed by Block 1?
Yes, it is. There is only contracts there that are employed.
Yeah, it's only contracts, right? So your sub-level contracts always supersede everything else as long as people agree to play within those contract rules.
Yes.
So even if let's say the V2 said you can never have opt-in arbitration on this chain, but then you enter into a subcontract with it and say, well, within this particular part of the chain, we agree to, as long as both parties agree, then you'd be able to, right? My understanding of how that would work, because that contract would supersede the other one. No, I think that's a really good idea, and I think that there are other ideas very much like that have been proposed in terms of opt-in solutions, in terms of insurance, and I think that those are great. Those don't take away from the fact that even if you didn't opt into those, you could have default arbitration as a recourse. And the advantage with having many ideas like what you proposed, if they're indeed doable, is that it would remove the pressure on default, because most people would go towards this. And so you'd have less claims here. So your argument of this not being scalable would now not be as strong, because less people would need the default because they would have this. Or they would have this option. Or if it's really easy and the UI is super easy to participate in this and the marketing is well done, so everybody is aware of this, then people would be able to do this. But you'd still have this at the base. Why not? Why can't both coexist?
Before we have 5 minutes on video, we're recording this. We got 5 minutes left. Just as FYI, after the 5 minutes, we could continue to talk. I'm just letting you guys. The recording will stop. That's the one thing. But go ahead, Marcin. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, just to sort of recap, I think I will still stand by our position on this. That we need to know what we're trading here, and I think that this immutability of a blockchain is an extremely important quality for a lot of people, for a lot of big investors, for a lot of people that don't know us, that subscribe to the trustless layer. And if it can be
and by immutability, you're talking about not just the mathematical immutability, but by the perceived immutability.
Yes, the mathematical is always
because there. The mathematical immutability is not being challenged by ECAF, right?
Yeah, of course, and it couldn't be, because we cannot technically reverse transactions on a blockchain. It's just like a version manager, more or less, right? But I think this is a very important quality that is going to. It has a price tag. If you remove it, there may be a lot of damage, because all of a sudden it does rely on trust towards individuals, which is a very hard sell, I think, in the blockchain space in general. And I think it is the motor behind what got blockchain started in the first place. Because if you do rely on trust,
part of it, for sure, trustless, yes, for sure.
Yeah, so I think if you take that away or question it and don't get much in return, because the argument
is... Who are we taking it away from? Who are we taking immutability away from the potential thieves?
No, from ourselves mostly, because we are the people that are invested in EOS. So if we take one of the qualities that make the blockchain strong and remove it from EOS by instating this this default arbitration and base layer, then there is a lot of questions like who runs this, how is it run, like why am I subjected to it, and things like that. And it's an awful lot of talking and explaining, and it's actually hard to piece it together in a convincing way. And if it doesn't,
are we right now debating the perception of immutability and how the perception of immutability should remain top priority, even though immutability itself is not being effective?
I don't think we're debating what exactly is to be won here by having a default layer arbitration that is too slow to stop a theft, and it doesn't have any other purpose, actually, because all the other arbitration bodies are probably going to be very specialized with doing certain kinds of businesses and will be a free market entity, and they will probably be chosen over ECAF just because of that, because of their specialized nature. So like, what is the purpose of ECAF? And I think the answer to that is for stopping these gigantic problems that have happened on blockchains. You know, if you take like the last 5 years of blockchains and you take the biggest 10 cock-ups that happened, I think this is where ECAF actually could shine, you know, to prevent or reverse another DAO or parity or things like that. But there aren't really disputes. They are just gigantic, you know, problems that have gotten out of hand. And this is where I would see the role of ECAF that could be funded to oversee specifically these things. But that's as far as I would go with it.
We have 30 seconds, just FYI. 30 seconds. Go ahead, John.
Those examples are the DAO type scenarios, are dApps that users would opt into arbitration, so they would be a forum. So you're saying that ECAF could serve as a default when those